Welcome, everyone. Guess what? It's time for another StarSpace chat. This is our semi-weekly, sometimes monthly. When it comes around, you should probably click the bell just so you get notified. Sort of sit down, where we sit down with the member of the entrepreneurial community or the community at large here in Oklahoma, state and city, and learn a little bit more about them. This is really just a chance to sit down and figure out what they're doing and where they're going and how the StarSpace 46 community can help them. Speaking of StarSpace 46, if this is the first time you've ever been here, there, not here, my name is Jeff Yenzer. I am the board secretary here at StarSpace 46, a co-working community down in the heart of Oklahoma City, just west of downtown, still technically downtown, right off the boulevard. So if you would ever like to use any of those co-working opportunities to get away from your remote office, feel free to come down and set up a tour, and we'd love to have you as either a member or maybe you have a funky full-time office suite like mine where you can put up your comic books. Anyway, I would like to take a moment to introduce our guest, Rachel Hubbard, who will be coming on and speaking with me. Rachel, come on in.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing really well.
Awesome.
Hey, it's not 107, so
I feel horrible. And this is going to quickly timestamp where we are in time for people that are watching this later. But the Pacific Northwest is not on fire. They just think they are because of the heat. Usually it's, horrible fires that are literal this time of year. And now it's just, they're like 108 today or something like that?
Yeah, I talked to a colleague of mine who was driving around with his dogs in his car so that they could cool off because they don't have any air conditioning in their house.
Yeah, I have colleagues. One of my clients has one of their staff members is up in Seattle, and they've just been camping for the last 3 days, just waiting for the heat to break. And I feel so bad because they're just not equipped for it. There's no such thing really as central heat and air up there. Nope. And when you get hit with something like this, there's got to be so much sweat in that town. I'm terrified of the ocean and sharks. I would still be in the Pacific Ocean just laying there if I was up there right now.
Absolutely.
Well, some people may know you, some people may not, but could you kind of tell me a little bit about yourself, Rachel?
Sure. So I'm the executive director at KOSU Radio. We are the NPR member station that is licensed to Oklahoma State University. So we're a nonprofit radio. And we air news and information from NPR and also locally produced news and information during the day. And then at night, we have a collaboration with local favorite, The Spy, to bring independent music to the air and also a lot of Oklahoma artists to the air at night and also on the weekends. So you can hear us in Central Oklahoma at 91.7 on the radio. Or you can use your smart speaker as a radio and tell it to play KOSU. You can also find us on the NPR News app or NPR One. So that's what we do. We cover, our broadcast coverage covers about 2/3 of the state of Oklahoma, primarily, generally like Woodward to all the way to the northeast corner, down to Pauls Valley, over to Tulsa, not quite down to Muskogee. So, big chunk of the state.
Yeah, that is a big chunk of the state. Most certainly. So I looked through your bio a bit, and I did see that you're a fellow communication person like myself. So tell me a little bit about how getting your degree in communication in agricultural communication brought us to this point.
Well, it actually didn't have anything to do with my degree in communications. I had worked at a radio station in high school in Hobart, KTJS, Great Plains Country. And so I read the obituaries and did a thing called Tradio, which was like Craigslist on the radio. And then I went to college at Oklahoma State and was shredding papers for a job, and thought that it was the most miserable existence that I could possibly have, and had a friend who was applying for a job at KOSU. And I was like, radio was far better than this. So I took his job, and I have been here in one capacity or another ever since, more than 20 years at this point. So crazy, not a career that I planned, just sort of happened that way.
It's awesome. I used to spend many times going through Hobart on the way to Altus, so I'm pretty sure I have heard that radio, not you personally, but I've heard that radio station going through there many, many times. I grew up out in Western Oklahoma as well, so we all just find our way around the state. It's just one big small town, essentially.
And side note, the producer of this podcast, Rodney Brazel, was one of my fellow employees at KTJS in Hobart. So,
see, Oklahomans never burn a bridge because someone will know you, and someone will, even worse, might remember you for the worst reasons. So what are you working on right now? Like what is encompassing your time? Because I mean, after 20 years in this industry and with this company, what have you grown this into?
Well, so I primarily worked on the journalism and the programming side, really observing the opportunities, networking, making a ton of connections during my time as a journalist. And that really built the foundation for my career now. I went back for my master's degree, actually in entrepreneurship it took me a couple of years to complete it because I was just doing it part-time, graduated in 2017, and really have just been interested in kind of the disruption of the business model side of things, because over the last decade, we've lost 24,000 journalists in the United States since 2004. And, you know, it's a pretty short period of time for an industry to just fall apart. And the newspaper industry, which was historically the backbone of the industry, hedge funds and venture capitalists have been purchasing these newspapers, dismantling them, selling the real estate, capitalizing on that, and then no one knows what happens to the news and information side. But the thing that has happened is that the local control element has been taken away. So now many of these are owned by international or multinational conglomerates, and they don't have a vested interest in the community. So while public radio used to be a sort of secondary news source, a thing that had a great niche following, a lot of people loved it, it's become a primary news source and a really critical one in the meantime. And we also were on a nonprofit model. So that allowed us to start to experiment with diversifying revenue sources and building a community, because we're here and we're on the ground and we live here, to figure out what the future looks like. And that's really where we are today.
Yeah. And I mean, I was in college during a lot of that, and I worked congruently with the journalism department. So we got to see the beginnings. And back then it was all doomsaying. You know, it was this idea that, oh, well, it could never get that bad. It could never, you know, these things, someone will stop it before newspapers truly go away. There will be something. And then, oh, you know, we'll always have the news and it's not going to get that bad. And it's truly been a sad journey in this amount of time, but also one that has really, it was a slap in the face for a lot of people that were watching those trends. And it's really nice to see that people are out there trying to get ahead of the curve and trying to diversify those sorts of things and make sure that there's a little bit more future proofing, because we have found so many backbones that were in the 20th century really just, you know, were disrupted and completely crumbled. So hopefully with those lessons, we're starting to build something that's a bit more, I don't know, foundationally secure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we could spend a lot of time, and there are a lot of people still in this industry that wish for what was, that we could go back to a golden age of newspaper that was in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. And it was a great era. It was a great era for news. Being a reporter was a great job. It was a secure job. And we can wish for those things and just be angry all the time. Or we can say, you know, what was, and it was great. Now, what is the next thing? And where do we fit? Yeah.
So that leads into a great question of, by your summation, what is the next thing? Where do you fit?
You know, audio right now is enjoying, you know, a really serious golden age. And there's a lot of interest in nonprofit news and that model right now. And it's something that public radio and KOSU have been doing for a long time. And so I think that, you know, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, we have sort of a lead on the business model because we have an existing contributor base and that sort of stuff. But as any entrepreneur knows, being first to market doesn't mean security in the market.
Right.
So I think that we have to, continue thinking about how we're serving the community, continue reinforcing the value proposition of, news and information, and making sure that, we're maintaining a level of trust, that we are not just doing the things that we've always done because they're the things that we've always done, which I think is a challenge in being, innovative and entrepreneurial in a long established organization or an organization with a long history. And so that's one of our continual challenges. So I can't say that I know all the answers, but I think that we're constantly scanning the landscape for opportunities and trying to figure out what we should stop doing.
Sure. Yeah. And so you're poised to take those opportunities when they arise. It's kind of that whole luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And what you were trying to do is create your own luck, which is, it's very nice to see. And as a fellow freelancer myself, no longer in the journalism or radio side of anything, but being able to notice all of these trends and get out ahead of them, and the almost validation that you feel when the industry starts to catch up to where you already are. It's like, I didn't realize that I was any sort of a trailblazer, but here I am, kind of at the front of the wagon trail, at least knowing where to go. And it's exciting, but it's a bit terrifying at times because you always have to stay on your toes.
For sure. There is no rest. And I think that that's been especially true the last year, but it's something that I tell my staff, almost every day, that if we're not a little bit scared or minimally uncertain about what we're doing, we are doing this wrong.
Right. No, I completely agree. If there's not a little bit of terror that's happening every single day of just the unknown, then that's at that point is when somebody else who's usually backed by millions of dollars, if not billions, will come in and try to take that from you. And it's so nice in this day and age where I think over the last decade, the news has really become something that people they take, whereas they used to take it with, the honest truth, they are starting to at least hopefully look at a lot of these things with some level of objectivity instead of pure subjectivity. So how do you kind of combat the just general idea that, news is bad and no one, it's all working for someone? What do you try to tell people that remind them that you are there for the community?
I don't think that it's telling people that we're there. I think it's showing them that we're there. And so, we clearly can speak, endlessly.
Sure.
And so the thing that we try to continue doing all the time, and it's the stuff that isn't necessarily on the radio, it's the text messaging club that we have that allows people to contact us and say, there's something wrong here. Hobart being one of those examples. We did a story in the last 6 months about the water quality in Hobart. Had nothing to do with me. Our rural and agricultural affairs reporter got a tip because he was talking to people in a Facebook group about what was concerning to them, and totally went down a rabbit hole because they were having a conversation about mail order chickens and whether or not they survived this crazy cold snap and the long delays in the postal service. Were people just getting boxes of dead baby chicks. And so he goes down, this person was like, you should check out the water supply in Hobart. It's horrible, blah, blah, blah. And so he could have just been like, not relevant. But he followed the rabbit trail and now has, more than 250 tips from people in rural Oklahoma who believe that their public officials are ignoring them. And, it's become a larger project that he is continuing to work on. So I think that that's one of the ways where it's like, yes, you told us something, here's what we did about it, and continuing that cycle of building trust with people who are trying to, find solutions to problems that they're actually experiencing. And that drives our editorial instead of us just sitting around talking to each other about what we think are the problems in the world or the things that we think need to be covered, but actually listening to the community. And, we got a call from a guy in Hinton, not even in our coverage area, neither is Hobart, as far as the radio. And he said, I just want to say thank you because I really didn't think anybody listened to us anymore. And those are the kinds of calls that we're getting. And I think that that's the kind of impact that journalism can have when you sort of forget everything you thought you knew and let the community lead you where you need to go.
Right. And it's so odd as you tell this story and how it harkens back to, everyone wanting that golden age of reporting. That's what it was like. You were, you'd sit at a coffee shop and you'd overhear two people talking, and then it'd take you down that bird dog rabbit hole, and you'd keep trying to figure things out and do the research and follow the lead. And as many things have changed, there are so many things that are still the same. And if you're leveraging it the way that you have, then there's always going to be a place for something like this, because they're static. They're always going to be there. But for people like you all to make sure to follow those leads and to do that ethical sort of, for lack of a better term, just following breadcrumbs, that really is the foundation of journalism. That's never going to change. And it's so neat to hear stories like that, because that's what you want to hear. And frankly, unless you're tapped into a community, you're never going to hear it. If you use a tower, it's an echo chamber.
And it's so easy to, be distracted. I was on a conference call with some colleagues around the country last week, and they were talking about the future. And the thing that really bothers me is that people constantly talk about the platform. Well, we need to do this in the digital space, and we need to have a podcast. And I actually have ironically, have a presentation that I do with college students that says your podcast is a bad idea. Don't do it. Because it's a crowded space and is not necessarily, the most effective way to communicate. And how are you going to get beyond, your Uncle Paul or whoever it is being your only audience member? And they're like, well, I have 12 audience members. And I'm like, well, how many of them are not related to you? And so, I think that podcasting and this sort of Wild West golden age of audio is a great place to experiment, but use it as that, a place to experiment. And don't believe that you're going to be the next podcast star, and don't be doing a podcast just because your boss comes to you and says, what we should do? Everybody else has a podcast and we should have one too. That's not that I'm trying to monopolize the industry, but I just really think that people should think beyond the first episode of their show.
Preach. As someone who was listening to podcasts, probably like you, back in like 2006, 2007, and when people talk about podcasts like it's this new thing, I'm like, you're 14 years behind the curve right now. Like you've got a lot of time to make up. And frankly, people are moving to other platforms and moving to other places to find, especially their community-driven information. They're going to single source and trying to figure that out. What's your plan? And a lot of people are just like, oh, I want to talk about something. And it's like, all right, well, what is that really serving? What can it help? And what are you giving back? So I think that's a great talk to have, because everybody just thinks they can start one. And just like you said, it's either family members, or how many of your views are you or someone on your podcast just checking it to make sure it looks good? Still counts as a view.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a thing. Well,
and I mean, a lot of people have a great idea, and that's the thing that I say is like, pitch something to us. Like if you have like an idea for a single story, then that is an opportunity to pitch something, to an outlet, and for you to, like KOSU or an existing podcast where you're not on the hook for producing something on the regular, because everybody usually has a great idea for one story. And then when you get beyond the first story, or maybe the first 5, some people have like 5 good ideas.
Right.
Well, that got you through month 1.
Yep. So, I mean, so often I try to just go be a guest on people's podcasts, because then it's exactly like that. You get to get your face out in front of their platform and on their community and their people, and maybe do that. Or like you said, loop in with somebody who already has a community, and then you are a valuable contributor or a subject matter expert for whatever you're bringing to the table. And trust me, as somebody who has been on every side of the podcast world, it's just easier to go on as a guest. You just get to come on, people like you. See, I like Rachel, so it's easy that way. So I have one final question, and that's on the basis of community, and that's how can the StarSpace46 community help you and your endeavors and what you're doing next?
So I think a couple of things. There's two major projects that we have going right now. One of them is a podcast. Sorry. But it actually is a huge deal because we did a podcast on the Tulsa Race Massacre with History Channel, WNYC Studios, and our show Focus Black Oklahoma. It was the only show that was driven entirely by Oklahoma producers from the conception. So, and Black Oklahoma producers, which I think is a really important distinction. So listen to that. It's called Blind Spot Tulsa Burning. We were able to sort of sustainably collaborate within our capacity using the heft of WNYC and History Channel's resources to really bring a great product to air. The second thing that I want to draw attention to is our project that we just launched in the month of June called StoryCorps One Small Step. So KOSU is one of 6 public radio stations to be a part of this project, where we're inviting people with different political views to come together for a StoryCorps style conversation and to remind us all why we're Americans, that we have things in common, even if we are fundamentally different. So we're really excited about that project. There's information on our website at kosu.org where you can sign up. We're also heavily promoting it on our social channels. So there's that. And then in terms of other things that you can do, listen to our audio streams or on the radio, I think is a huge thing. It helps you be a better citizen. It helps you be more informed. And if you are so inclined to personally contribute, more than 50% of our revenue comes from people giving what they can. Many of those are monthly gifts in the same style as you would pay for Netflix, where you're giving, $10 a month or something. So that's a huge deal. It's tax deductible under the American Rescue Plan. And if you are launching a business, we have a number of small and local businesses who swear by KOSU's audience and our referrals and the traffic that they get from, we call it underwriting because we're nonprofit radio. It is not insurance. It's like advertising, but it's like on Sesame Street, where they say support for Sesame Street comes from the letter E. This would come from your business. And we have a number of local businesses that do that. So those are, the specific ways that you can support us. And I'm happy to answer any questions. We love being part of the Oklahoma community, and we believe this is truly a partnership. So if you have crazy ideas, talk to us first, because we did have a person set up a dating site for us once. So, talk to us first, but we're very open to collaborating. We're very open to ideas.
All right. Well, I'll take my idea for the dating site to someone else then. It was a pleasure having you. It truly was. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure to get all of the links down in the description below so that people can just go in very easily and link off to all of the things that you've mentioned, because those are all amazing efforts and endeavors and productions. And I really, just in my heart, I want to see you all succeed. So we will do everything that we can to help make that happen.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff.
Of course. Thank you so much, Rachel. I hope that was something that maybe you didn't already know. And if you already knew about it, maybe it's a bit more. But people like that are really what make Oklahoma great. And, I like to think that Oklahoma is better than just okay. So it's really that sense of community. And as you can see throughout all of these series of videos, we all come from different places. But as Oklahomans, it's all one big community. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this. As usual, please share this with your friends. Hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the little bell if you're on YouTube. That way, when these randomly released episodes pop up, you're the first to know. Also, like I said, come down to StarSpace46, schedule a tour. Feel free to join up, become part of our community, and that way you can come in and get away from the home office, because I mean, it's been almost 18 months now, and many of you are probably tired of bouncing ideas off of your cat. Let's be honest, I am, and they're outside cats. So feel free, come down and truly be part of something more, because as we are all beginning to come back into a larger community from being away from it, let's use that energy and actually make sure that we are making not only Oklahoma, but our nation and our world a bit better. As usual, you can always, as a shameless plug, buy some merch at merch46.com if you want to show that you're a member of the community to random strangers on the street. I mean, that's always fun. And we do always have community co-working that is free on Wednesdays. So if you are wanting to dip your toe in the pool of what co-working could be like, feel free to pop down any Wednesday, any week, any month, and we will welcome you with open arms between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I've been Jeff Yenzer, and this has been another StarSpace Chat, and I'll see you next time.